there's mixed feeling online about whether they should be welcome in the United States. What do you think? Connect with us throughout the show using the hashtag AJNewsGrid.
You're with the NewsGrid live on air and streaming online through YouTube, Facebook Live and at AlJazeera.com. And 24 hours ago on this broadcast, we were just waiting, really, for the rubber stamp on Nikol Pashinyan's ascension to the job of Armenian Prime Minister. It looked like a done deal. And then it wasn't. Parliament rejected his bid on Tuesday evening, even though he was the only candidate. So Pashinyan called on supporters to go on a nationwide strike, and they did. They are. Tens of thousands of Armenians continuing to protest, blocking the roads and government buildings, leaving parts of the capital, Yerevan, kind of paralysed, really. Remember, Pashinyan led 2 weeks of protests, the ones which forced the former Prime Minister, Serge Sargsyan, to resign last week. He said his rejection now was, quote, an insult to the people. We're going to get a live update from Yerevan in just a moment. First, though, here is Nikol Pashinyan speaking a little bit earlier to Peter Dobby on Al Jazeera.
Nothing went wrong because all this happening is in favor of us, because after yesterday's event in the parliament, the circle of our supporter became larger, and today's scale of the civil disobedience action is much more bigger than 2 days ago.
Are you claiming you've got more support in the Parliament today than you had? Pardon me for interrupting you. Are you saying you've got more support today in the Parliament than you had this time yesterday?
No, I'm speaking about support in the society among the people.
Okay.
So afterward, this people's support will become concrete political support. You know, the problem is that real power now today is on the people's hand, and there is no way to back. And as soon a Republican majority understand that, as good for Armenia, for anyone.
How far down the road of civil disobedience are you prepared to go? You led the demonstrations in 2008. 10 people died. You didn't get political power then. Why will you get political power now?
I tried to explain you that there is no, listen, there is no any mutual thing with 2008. It is a completely different situation, because we have support more than 19% of Armenian population and support of the Armenian diaspora. There is no forces now in Armenia that can fight against the people. There is no any mutual thing with 2008. In 2008 was presidential elections, and people should decide they are in favor of Levon Ter-Petrosyan, or they are in favor of Serge Sargsyan, or against Serge Sargsyan and in favor of Levon Ter-Petrosyan. But now people are not fighting for me, for Nikol Pashinyan. Everyone is fighting, everyone is stand up for his own dignity, his own family, his own right and his own future, and for future of his own children. There is no any mutual thing. There is no any risk for violence, because we are controlling fully the situation in Republic of Armenia.
To the streets of Yerevan now. Here is Robin Forestier-Walker, hopefully getting the latest news there. Actually, I see you on your phone. What are you hearing, Robin, about any developments?
You know, let's just say, I don't want to call it, but I am in a moment in communication with one of the Republican members of Parliament who's just said to me, and I will read it literally to you, any candidate who will have the 35 MPs nomination will have the support of our team. Now, that means, if I understand him correctly, that the candidate nominated for Prime Minister was Nikol Pashinyan. Yesterday. He was unopposed in terms of his candidacy. Next week, when this all-important second vote will take place, he needs 35, if I understand it, MPs to back him. And so, as we understand today, he's been in touch with a political faction that has already supported his candidacy. So he has those 35. And now I'm just, again, reading. Any candidate who will be nominated by 35 MPs, as required by the Constitution, may expect the support of ours. This is coming from the Republican Party, which means, and we need to be careful on this, but this means that the Republicans appear to be saying that they will now back Nikol Pashinyan for Prime Minister. Now, if that is the case, you heard it here first, and we'll be listening out now to see if the crowd is about to hear that too, because you probably are aware of the fact that around me now, a lot of people driving past, car horns going off all the time, flags waving. This has been the kind of day we've had in Yerevan, but this is really, you know, developing at a fast pace. Things are changing all the time. Earlier, we were walking past the foreign ministry, which doubles up as the culture ministry, and the students, the kids had been out there. They'd surrounded the place all day, erupted with applause, because the culture minister gave up, walked out of the office and said, "I'm quitting." And so, you know, things are changing every minute here. But that is a really significant thing. If the Republicans are going to back Nikol Pashinyan, it's game over. We have Nikol Pashinyan, who is going to be Prime Minister. But, you know, I'm waiting to see, you know, what comes forward on that.
Yeah, OK. Thanks, Robin. Well done on all of that. We're going to try to corroborate with some of what you're saying with our guests, Maria Titizian, who is a editor-in-chief of EVN Report in Armenia, with us via Skype. Does everything Robin just say, does that correlate with what you're hearing as well, Maria?
Yes, it does. Today, the Republican Party had a closed session in Parliament. Afterward, Bahram Baghdasaryan, who is the leader of the faction, came out to speak with reporters, and he said that if the nominee had 1/3, so about 35 members of Parliament voting in favor of him, then they would support that candidate, which effectively means we have no official statement at the moment. This is just what he has said to reporters following their meeting. That means that effectively on May 8th, Nikol Pashinyan would be elected prime minister if everything goes according to plan. Now, Baghdasaryan said that taking into consideration, so I'm just reading my notes, taking into consideration the situation in the country, that they felt that this was the right decision to take, and has asked everybody to open the roads and go back to their homes. But now there's about 100,000 people on the square. So
look, I know
that's
this
the
will
situation.
be anything we discuss now will be remotely speculative. However, what I notice here is the back and forth. So it went from Serge Sargsyan, who wouldn't leave, and then eventually did leave, and then it was, well, we'll support Nikol Pashinyan, and then, or at least no one will be put up against him, and then we don't approve him, and now, yes, we might support. This back and forth, is it, I mean, is this the party realising that the people are serious here and they're not going anywhere?
Sure. Sure. So we just got official confirmation from the state news agency that, in fact, that on May 8th, we will have a new prime minister, because the Republican Party has just made the announcement official. And I think I can hear the crowd because we're about 100 meters from Republic Square. Wow. So that is official. About the back and forth, I think that the Republican Party did not clearly understand what was really happening in the streets. They did not clearly understand the power of the people that have, you know, for the past almost 3 weeks now, incessantly and unequivocally voiced their discontent and sometimes their outward hatred toward the Republican Party. And I think today, when they shut down the road to the airport, when the entire city was on lockdown, I couldn't get to work. I had to walk 45 minutes to get here because all of the intersections were blocked. People were just reticent. They were ready, they were prepared, and I think this was the tipping point for Armenia. And the fact that not a single bullet was shot, that this was a peaceful, massive action of civil disobedience is really, really extraordinary.
Maria Titizian from EVN Report in Armenia, thank you so much for that, breaking that news as well, confirming what Robin Forrestier-Walker had heard. And in fact, I hope we've still got Robin Forrestier-Walker there. Any sign of things on the street? Is it getting a bit more rowdy out there?
I was rather hoping that we would have a rapturous crescendo of applause and cheers just as I was breaking that news. But We're a little bit away from the square where everybody is gathered again. And Maria said she could hear the applause. I don't think it's quite sunk in yet. And also, of course, that vote's still to happen. So it's not as if he is now Prime Minister, but he's the presumptive Prime Minister. And I mean, it's just an indication of, again, how extraordinarily things have speeded up. We're in warp speed at the moment for Armenia. And what's just abundantly clear is how the people have controlled the city and have shown the Republican Party that they misunderestimated, just were completely out of touch with the will on the street, with their decision yesterday in Parliament where they got to grandstand for 9 hours, but out on the street it's just a completely different picture. And I think this explains why now they've come to their senses to accept that the Armenian people have decided it's Nikol Pashinyan, it's time for a change. And that's what we're seeing unfolding right now here on the streets of Yerevan.
Yeah, I guess people will be wary until it actually happens, given all the back and forth. Robin, thank you for that. Robin Forrester-Walk was reporting from Yerevan. Rahila's here in the studio with us. I mean, this is all just happening right now, but the push online and the feel about this whole revolutionary feel has been quite big, hasn't it?
And a lot of it has stemmed from social media. So we've been monitoring all the details, and we still see a few of these hashtags over the last couple of days, like reject Serge and reject the Republican Party. But much of it is really about the festival atmosphere. People are calling this the Velvet Revolution, reiterating that it really is a peaceful protest. Now, this user says that there were no broken things, no fire, no beaten policemen, no violence, and we won without a weapon. Well, live news feeds and social media helped mobilize these rallies that led to Prime Minister Serge Sargsyan's resignation. Tens of thousands of students took to the streets chanting, "Make the step to reject Serge." And the Armenian diaspora also played a significant role with solidarity marches around the world. 5,000 marched to the consulate in Los Angeles. And then there were other rallies that took place in France, Russia, as well as Canada. And we've been looking at some of the most notable moments online that took place during the protests. This video of an activist who managed to escape police arrest has gone viral. And then there's this one of a protester held in a police station. And as you can see, he's taking down a photo of Serge Sargsyan and is throwing it out of the window. Then you have others who have resorted to dance to express their opposition in the streets. Well, the man behind these protests, opposition leader Nikol Pashinyan, is not new to social media. In fact, he's been live streaming intimate and direct commentary for years. Selfie-style videos like these from inside a car or while walking have helped him establish a strong connection with the people. Well, if you are currently in Armenia, we would love to hear from you. Send us your views or any of your videos. Use the hashtag AJNewsGrid.
Thanks, Rahila. Yeah, we really do want to see. I'm just actually monitoring Twitter at the moment and seeing a lot of breaking news about this, but not any pictures or video yet. So if you can, hashtag AJNewsGrid. Alert us to it, or if you're out and about or you know someone who's out and about in Yerevan, tell them to get in touch. Twitter at AJ English. You can reply to the thread there. You can use the live stream at facebook.com/Al Jazeera to comment as you go, or again, alert us to anything you're seeing, or use that number actually, +974 501 11149. Use your WhatsApp, send us a video or any pictures if you can, and Telegram working on that one as well. Now, let's move on. At least 16 people have been killed in a series of attacks at Libya's election commission in the capital. Now, a suicide bomber detonated his explosives inside, and other armed fighters then set fires elsewhere in the building. This is just days after the international quartet praised improved security in the war-torn country and pushed for early elections. Hannah Hotster has more.
Attackers targeted the Electoral Commission headquarters on Wednesday morning with a twin suicide bombing. Others then stormed the building and set it on fire. ISIL has claimed responsibility for the attack, but the assault comes days after the UN pressured Libya's leaders to hold elections by the end of the year. The International Quartet of the EU, Arab League, African Union and the UN met on Monday to promise assistance in organising the voting. Despite the quartet's optimistic talk of improving security, Libya remains divided. The UN-backed and internationally recognised National Accord government in Tripoli was formed 3 years ago. Fayez al-Sarraj is the Prime Minister, but he struggled to establish authority of his government beyond the capital. Pitted against the government of the National Accord in the west is the Tobruk administration in the east, under the control of the self-declared Libyan National Army. Its commander, the renegade General Khalifa Haftar, controls the oil-rich east and its vital export terminals. He recently shrugged off talk of elections and urged Libyans to follow his army instead.
I want you to trust the army. It will lead you to what you aim for. I know you want a real life, not a semblance of a life that results from elections.
Haftar has expressed disdain for the government of National Accord in Tripoli. Government leaders in the capital say that before elections are held, Libyans should agree on a new electoral law and a constitution.
They want to turn their back on past agreements and take us all the way to new elections.
Haftar's army, which is supported by UAE and Egypt, is more powerful than troops based in Tripoli. And the general, who recently returned home after medical treatment, is widely seen by his supporters as the only Libyan leader qualified to end years of infighting. Hannah Hoxter, Al Jazeera.
We're going live to Washington, D.C. now. Donald Trump has just stepped up to the podium at the State Department. This is for the swearing-in of the man you can see behind him, Mike Pompeo.
I say that's more spirit than I've heard from the State Department in a long time, many years. We can say many years, maybe many decades. It's going to be a fantastic start, a fantastic day, and that spirit will only be magnified, only with this man right here. I know that for a fact. So thank you all for being here. It's great to be with you, the extraordinary men and women of the State Department. We are profoundly grateful for everything you do for our country, and you'll be doing things that you don't even know about. Right now, they're not even a glimmer in your eye, but and we have a couple going, Mike, right now that a lot of people don't know about that are very, very encouraging. I also want to thank Vice President Pence and the many members of my cabinet for joining us this morning. We're here to celebrate the swearing in of America's new Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. Mike. This day is a testament to your exceptional skill, Mike, a skill and service that's been honed over a lifetime, no matter where you went. We're joined by Mike's wife, Susan, and his son, Nick, and I want to thank you both for sharing this wonderful moment with us all. Thank you very much. Thank you. Mike is a true American patriot. He has devoted many years of his life to defending America, beginning when he entered West Point. And as you all heard, he entered at 18 and he ended up graduating first in his class. You know, I heard that rumor a long time ago. I thought it was a rumor of, I don't know, you know, here first of it. And I've heard it so many times. I've also heard I was first in my class at the Wharton School of Finance. And sometimes when you hear it, you don't say anything. You just let it go. But I heard it with him. And being first in your class at West Point, because I know, that's a big deal. So I said, is that true? Yeah. I asked a few other people, is that true? Yeah. So I started bringing it up. I brought it up about 4 weeks ago. Right, David? And after that, everybody brings it up, so I don't have to say it anymore. He was actually first in his class at West Point. And soon he was deployed to Germany, where he served a cavalry officer prior to the fall of the Berlin Wall. After leaving active duty service, Mike graduated from Harvard Law School with high honors. Great student. Mike was elected to Congress in 2010 by the people of the 4th District of a great state, Kansas. Right? It is. In the House, he distinguished himself as a member of the Intelligence Committee. For the last 15 months, Mike served as our nation and served our nation as the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, where I can tell you they have such respect for him. It's unbelievable. They may be the only people that are not very happy right now, but they'll be happy. They'll be happy with our Gina, who's here today. And his exceptional leadership of the CIA earned the admiration of his colleagues in the cabinet, the Congress, the intelligence community, as well as our foreign allies and partners. Mike has also earned my deepest respect and admiration and trust, and you'll see why over the coming years, probably over the coming months. I have absolute confidence that he will do an incredible job as the nation's 70th Secretary of State. As Mike travels the world, he will carry out the greatest mission and highest duty of the State Department to represent the interests of the American people. This mission includes overseeing more than 13,000 Foreign Service officers who act as our representatives to the world, 12,000 consular officers and administrator of just an incredible immigration system, a system that we're going to be changing and fixing and making better, a system that's under siege right now, but a system that will, in fact, hopefully be the talk of the world by the time we finish. You have 3,500 security personnel and thousands more diplomats, embassy staff, civil servants, and administrative personnel, all of whom collectively play a vital role in advancing the safety, liberty, prosperity, and all good things of the United States. Very important people, great people. As President Eisenhower said in 1953, make no mistake, the reason we have representatives around the world is to protect American interests. For nearly 230 years, the men and women of the United States State Department have skillfully and proudly answered this call. And now, at this moment in time, I can think of no better person to lead these dedicated public servants than our new Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. Secretary Pompeo, congratulations again. I have no doubt that you will make America proud as our nation's chief diplomat. You're an exceptional guy, a great friend, and somebody that truly loves our country. We are really, really proud of you. I speak on behalf of everybody in this room and also on behalf of your family. Thank you very much, Mike, and congratulations.
So the swearing-in ceremony for Mike Pompeo, new Secretary of State, former CIA Director, President Trump speaking there. Mike Pompeo's wife, Susan, with him as well. I'm going to go straight to Kimberly Halkett, actually, who's been listening into some of that as well. Kimberly, right at the start of that speech, I heard President Trump say, you know, there was all the applause in the room, and he said that's the most spirit we've heard from state in many decades. Now, I'm sure people would argue with that, but I guess what he's sort of saying is, my guy's in now, and together we're going to get it done.
Yeah, decades definitely a stretch, but the last year, not so much. Certainly morale has been very low at the U.S. State Department. So this is very much an effort by the Trump administration under Mike Pompeo now as the chief diplomat to push reset, if you will. Already he has been making overtures to the staff to try and boost the morale that has been sagging, lifting things like hiring freezes. But it goes beyond the staff, the thousands of diplomats who will be affected by this personnel change. It really affects the entire world, given the fact you just heard there from Donald Trump that these diplomats are there to protect U.S. interests. There are implications to this changing at the top of the U.S. State Department, and most notably the way that will be be affected and felt is in some of the major foreign policy decisions that are going to be taking place in just the next few weeks. Thinking about the Iran deal, where the president may not recertify that. Certainly Mike Pompeo very involved there, and also in the upcoming meeting that will be taking place between the president and Kim Jong-un. Certainly there is a recognition that there is a need to try and rebuild some of the relationships that have been damaged in the recent months, in the early days of the Trump administration. And so that's why we also saw Mike Pompeo taking an active role just within hours of his confirmation, setting out on a bit of charm offensive, going for the first 5 days on the job, traveling to Europe and the Middle East as
Kimberly,
the effort was done to try and reassure American allies.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Kimberly, but Mike Pompeo has just started speaking. Let's have a quick listen and I'll come back to you after that.
I was also glad to see you, USAID Administrator Mark Green. I look forward to working with you. I want to first thank God for this opportunity and for the many blessings he has granted to me in my life. My wife Susan and my son Nick are two of the greatest of these. They are my #1 fans most days. And they have shown unyielding support to me throughout my confirmation process and at every other stage in my public service career. I love you both very, very much. I want to thank John Sullivan, Deputy Secretary Sullivan. Where's John? There. John, thank you. Thank you for your service in this interim period. Mr. President, I also want to say thank you to you. You have entrusted me with a weighty and awesome responsibility to serve the American people, first as the director of the CIA and now as the Secretary of State. This responsibility becomes more sobering when we consider the many threats to American security and prosperity and our liberty. Mr. President, I promise you, my team and I will be unrelenting in confronting those threats. We will employ tough diplomacy when necessary to put the interests of the American people first. I will work to ensure their safety, to preserve their rights, and defend their values. And I will make sure America is always a respected and principled leader on the world stage.
Mike Pompeo beginning his address there at the State Department, obviously thanking everyone who's gotten to this point. Kimberly Halkett, our White House correspondent, still listening. Kimberly, it strikes me, whilst we talk about all the things which are happening, the Irans, the North Koreas, the global trade issues, which are all happening at the moment, something else Mike Pompeo needs to do is start hiring, because all the press I've seen about the State Department says that there are so many key positions which are still not filled.
Right, and that was part of the reason, and I alluded to some of the morale issue that the State Department has been dealing with, a sort of collective funk that has sort of settled over the thousands of diplomats that work not only here in Washington, but around the world. So immediately we saw, just in the last couple of days, a lifting of some hiring freezes with regard to spouses. Seems like a small deal, but pretty big for a lot of the employees there who feel that they kind of got left behind in terms of priorities under Rex Tillerson. You really, when you look at Rex Tillerson, the former Secretary of State, and Mike Pompeo, the men couldn't be more different. Rex Tillerson was very methodical, coming from an engineering background. He kind of shunned the spotlight and the media. Already we've seen a shift under Mike Pompeo, a former congressman, certainly very comfortable in front of the camera when he just finished up his sort of whirlwind tour immediately after being confirmed by the U.S. Senate in his role as he went to the Middle East and Europe. He brought reporters along. He held press conferences, very much comfortable in the spotlight, engaging, and certainly trying to involve as he meets with different leaders. So certainly there is a very different tone, but there's another tone in other respects, too. He's very hawkish. He's very much in lockstep with Donald Trump in terms of how he sees the Iran deal, for example, seeing it as a bad deal that is not in U.S. interest. And certainly we also saw saw him traveling to meet with Kim Jong-un in a secret meeting in Pyongyang over the Easter weekend, laying the groundwork for that very important meeting between the president and the North Korean leader later this month or early next month. So certainly we're going to see a difference, I believe, as he heads up this State Department now, in contrast to Rex Tillerson. But it may not always be what American allies like. As you heard there, he said what he's looking for is to be unrelenting in protecting American interests. Some tough diplomacy certainly likely to come out of the U.S. State Department under the new Secretary of State.
Kimberly Halkett's at the White House. Thank you for that, Kimberly. And as we look at the live wall right now, actually, we'll look at it in a moment, but there is more background on Mike Pompeo at AlJazeera.com. It zeroes in on some of his more controversial positions, comments he's made about Muslims and immigrants, also on the issue of torture and on Guantanamo Bay as well. This was all during his time as CIA director. It looks at how those stances might affect his new role as the US's top diplomat. If you just search for Pompeo torture or Pompeo Guantanamo or something like that, you'll find that piece pretty easily. So, yeah, as I was saying, just looking at the live wall, it's pretty much Pompeo and Trump everywhere at the moment. We're keeping an eye out for any live pictures from Yerevan, of course, as maybe that news starts to filter out about Nikol Pashinyan likely to be the next Prime Minister of Armenia. In the meantime, here's Mariam Namazi in our London studios with more international news. Hi, Mariam.
Hi there, Kamal. Yes, that's right. Some important political developments here in the UK, with the Prime Minister facing a revolt from within her own party on Brexit, which could potentially bring down her government. A group of around 60 Eurosceptic MPs from Theresa May's ruling Conservative Party have spoken out against her favoured plan for a customs partnership with the EU post-Brexit. The government's so-called Brexit War Cabinet is meeting to try to find a solution.
We will be leaving the customs union. We want to ensure that we can have an independent trade policy. We also want to ensure that we actually deliver. We're committed to delivering on our commitment of no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, and ensuring we have as frictionless trade as possible with the European Union.
Jonah Hull is following events for us in Westminster.
Well, talks in the so-called War Cabinet on Brexit are likely to go past Wednesday, of course, but they begin in earnest today on Britain's customs relations with the European Union after Brexit, and what position the government decides to take into negotiations may well determine the nature of Britain's exit from the European Union. Why? Because, well, if it goes in with a position that would require some sort of border to be set up between Northern Ireland in the UK and the Republic of Ireland in the EU to monitor trade, well, that is something the EU would not accept, and that likely would push Britain towards a so-called hard Brexit, leaving with no trade deal that many economists say would be very damaging to the economy here. The Prime Minister is pushing for a particular arrangement called a customs partnership, in terms of which Britain would mirror EU regulations at its borders, charging tariffs for the EU on goods passing through to the EU, and then giving refunds to importers delivering goods only to the UK, potentially based on its own trade arrangements that it makes separate to the EU after Brexit. That is something that would not require a border. It might, therefore, be acceptable to the EU. The problem is that it is not acceptable to a pretty influential bunch of pro-Brexit MPs in her own party, who say it will deliver nothing but Brexit in name only, that it is a customs union to all intents and purposes. They've demanded she drop it and have tacitly, if not directly, threatened her leadership over it. All the while, time is against the government here. They've got to reach a settled position before a big meeting of the EU in June, at which it will be decided whether to advance negotiations or not towards a final deadline of October, by which time they hope to reach a final deal for Britain's exit from the European Union, or no deal at all.
The Basque separatist group ETA has announced it has disbanded. In an open letter, it declared all of its structures have completely been dissolved. The organisation campaigned for 50 years for an independent state between northern Spain and southern France. ETA killed more than 800 people between 1968 and 2010 before declaring a ceasefire a year later. Nadim Baba is in San Sebastian and joins us live now. Nadim, what does ETA's move away from violence mean for the country?
Well, Mariam, I think practically probably very little in terms of the violent campaign, because, as you've just said, that ended with a 2011 ceasefire, which has held. There were previous announcements from ETA of ceasefires, which were followed by further killings. I'm in San Sebastian, in Spain's Basque country, the semi-autonomous region, and it was here in 1968 that the group claimed its first victim, a secret police chief. And over the years, they've killed hundreds of people. Now, the associations which represent their victims say that there are still hundreds of unsolved murders. So although the group says it's disbanding, the victims' associations want ETA to do more to tell them where those other victims are. ETA has been expected for a long time to announce its disbanding. Last month, it issued a letter in which it apologised to some of the victims of what it called the conflict. It said that people were caught up who didn't deserve to be. That apology was met by the government with a bit of scepticism, saying that's not enough, you need to formally disband. ETA said we will be doing that at the beginning of May. Now, we've been expecting a video statement perhaps in the next couple of days ahead of a big conference on Friday in the southwest of France, of course part of the area which ETA wanted to claim as a Basque homeland. And that conference on Friday, attended by international mediators and Basque politicians, to really put their seal on the final end of ETA. This statement, which has been reported by the Spanish press in the last couple of hours, perhaps a bit premature. People didn't expect it so quickly, but it is very much part of what people have been getting used to. ETA have not been killing people on the streets of Spain in the last few years. They are politically represented by a number of parties who say they will continue the push for independence, but that push is only supported by perhaps 15, maximum 20% of the population here. So it's not as strong a feeling as, for example, in Catalonia. And the Basque country does enjoy a lot of autonomy. So I think that the feeling is that ETA has lost ground in the last couple of decades, and nobody's really surprised by this statement.
Thanks very much. With the latest from San Sebastian, Nadim Baba. We'll have more from London in about 20 minutes' time. Now back to Doha.
To Mexico now, where we've been tracking the so-called migrant caravan that's been on a journey through South America or Central America to the Mexico-US border. A handful of the caravan members have been allowed to apply for political asylum in the US, but around 115 asylum seekers are waiting on that Mexican side for their chance. Manuel Rapallo spoke with some of them at their makeshift camp in Tijuana.
Over the last month, this group of Central American migrants has attracted international attention. Many of them fled their homes in Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala to reach the U.S. southern border. But only a few steps away from where the so-called migrant caravan has camped outside the border crossing, dozens of other migrants share similar hopes of reaching a safe place to live. This former taxi driver, who fears revealing his identity, is from the Mexican state of Michoacan. Now camping under a plastic tarp with his wife and children, he says he was forced from his home after 18 of his colleagues were killed by criminal groups over a span of 2 months.
You can't work at night anymore because you might get shot. Many people have died and their bodies cut up. There have been shootings between criminals where many children lost their lives. It's innocent people that get caught in the crossfire.
Mexican states like Michoacan, where many of these people are from, suffer record rates of homicide and violent crime. The stories they tell are no different from those fleeing violence in Honduras, El Salvador, or Guatemala, but have failed to capture the same attention. International human rights observers like Madeline Penman say these families have a right to be heard.
Both Mexican asylum seekers and Central American asylum seekers fleeing situations where their lives are at risk. We think that a few dozen families is not a threat to the United States, is not in any way a criminal act, and it is not a crime to seek asylum in the United States, especially when your life is at risk.
The migrant caravan has become the topic of fierce debate among American politicians and media pundits, but residents of Tijuana are accustomed to seeing a constant flow of individuals seeking asylum to the U.S. throughout the year. It may range from a few dozen to several thousands at a time.
While these asylum seekers from Mexico and Central America continue to wait outside the U.S. border for their names to be called, record levels of violence in their home countries ensures that thousands more will take their place after the cameras have gone. Manuel Rapalo, Al Jazeera, Tijuana.
Now, we just want to put all of this into some context before we speak to our guest, because we're talking about one caravan, as they call it, and it's getting a lot of attention, but there is a much bigger picture too. I want you to have a look at this from migrationpolicy.org. This is showing the number of refugees or asylum seekers who have been allowed into the United States. The purple line is the one to watch, because that is the ones who have actually been let into the country, and right at this point in time, it's quite low. It's below 50,000. It had dropped from, well, that's around 80,000 or so there, at the same time as the blue line has gone up, and that is the cap, the ceiling every year on how many could be allowed in. So more could be allowed in, but fewer are. And we've got Angelo Guisado to talk about this now, a staff attorney at the Center for Constitutional Rights, joining us on Skype from New York. It seems like, well, timing is everything, and this is a bad time really for people to be trying to come into the United States, it seems, particularly from Mexico and Central America, just because of the attitude which the Trump administration has taken towards them.
I think that's correct. One thing to keep into context is that migrants have been coming to the United States to seek asylum for dozens of years, and only now has the Trump administration, with their demagoguery, really tried to make it seem like America doesn't have a legal obligation to hear their asylum claims, when in fact they actually do.
Talk us through how it happens, because yesterday I think it was 8 people from the caravan had been led across the border, another 17 today I think it was. What actually happens to them in this process of seeking asylum?
Sure, of course. So when an individual comes to the border, they tell an officer that they have, if it's true, a well-founded fear of persecution back in their home country. They're then processed, their information is taken. They're there sent to what's known as a credible fear interview. And that's when an immigration officer determines whether or not their fear of returning to their home country is indeed credible. If they pass, and many of them do because of the horrible things that they've suffered, they then get put into immigration proceedings where eventually they'll see a judge.
And
but
eventually must be the key word there, Angelo. I'm wondering, I mean, how long, well, is it one of these how long is a piece of string things? It could take any amount of time.
Sure. I think it can range from months for sure. One thing to keep in mind is that these individuals are placed into detention, jails, which are privately funded and privately run. And, you know, the administration's backers make money when immigrants are detained, right? They have bed quotas. They need to fill these beds. So it can take months, perhaps even years.
Angelo, thank you for joining us. I appreciate that, trying to get a bit of context, a bit of explanation as to how this whole system works. We appreciate that. Here's Rahila now. I mean, I just imagine this is as divisive as anything online, just given the nature of political discourse in the US these days, right?
It really is. I mean, online right now, the conversation is even more polarized as before, as the migrant caravan reached the US-Mexico border. Now, on one side, there are people in the US who are welcoming the migrants, and they're tweeting with hashtags like March Without Borders and TPS Justice. Now, TPS refers to Temporary Protected Status, a federal program that allows immigrants from 10 countries to legally live and work in the United States. This is a policy which President Donald Trump wants to scrap. Now, people have been marching in support of the caravan throughout the week. And the American actor Matt McGorry was also there at the San Ysidro port of entry for asylum seekers.
I think it is, you know, part of the responsibility of privilege as a natural-born citizen here, as a white person, and as someone with various privileges that allow me to put my body on the line in a way that where I am taking less risk than even my undocumented friends here who are showing up and facing a lot more.
And then on the other side of the debate, there are those who don't want the migrants to cross over to the United States. Many are using the hashtag caravan of illegals. Well, this user shares a post saying that migrants should be turned away. They should seek asylum in Mexico and not in America. And then you have another who says, if we let them pass, there could be more. And then there's Sari, who says that as a child of illegal immigrants, she is disgusted with what she calls border jumpers. Well, if you are watching us from the US or from Mexico, do share your thoughts with us. Use the hashtag AJNewsGrid.
Thanks for that, Rahila. Delegates from 22 Arab countries, together with 9 UN agencies, are all in Kuwait at the moment to discuss anything related to water. This is the third Arab Water Conference, and the focus is climate change, regional water disputes and cooperation. Now, yes, very hot and dry in this part of the world, but this is, of course, a global problem. So before we zero in on the Arab world, let's just go around the world a little bit. And, well, remember back in March when South Africa made global headlines, it looked like Cape Town would be the first city to run out of water. July 15 was supposed to be day zero when the government would turn off the taps to homes and businesses, but that sort of doomsday scenario has been pushed now to next year. India's IT hub, Bangalore, you may not have known this, looked like it was heading in the same direction. You could also add on water shortages in places like Tokyo, Jakarta, Sao Paulo in Mexico, Beijing, Cairo and London, all to varying degrees. But it is not just in these urban jungles, in rural areas too. Water scarcity is common. The UN says 1.2 billion people live in areas of physical water scarcity. But as we say, this is an Arab Water Summit, so we want to focus on one country, and that is Jordan. Have a look at this, for example, at aljazeera.com. You are talking about a lot of wastage there. 76 billion litres of water wasted every year when we're at a time where domestic usage of water is going to increase by 50 to 60% in the next 30 years, and demand is expected to exceed resources by more than 26%. It's a huge issue. It is the agriculture sector which uses up the most of the water, but only contributes about 3 to 4% of GDP. So that's just one example, plenty more in this part of the world. And we've got Charlie Iceland with us to talk about it, Director of Global and National Water Initiatives at the World Resources Institute. He's in Washington on Skype. Thank you so much for your time, Charlie. I mean, look, we're up against it in this part of the world. It's hot and dry. It's as simple as that. So there has to be alternatives. Desalination's a big thing, but what else can people discuss, can people make happen here?
Well, as you mentioned, agriculture uses the vast majority of the water that's used in the Middle East and North African countries. So any solution has to focus on that sector. And while this contribution to GDP is small, this sector employs millions of people, large percentages in each of these countries. So one thing to do is to install more water-efficient irrigation systems, such as drip irrigation systems, and get away from sprinkler or flood systems. Another thing to do is to plant less water-thirsty crops, or not plant crops altogether. Of course, this will require a lot of help and intervention from the government to help farmers transition to these better technologies or to other types of livelihoods.
Is there any new technology out there that you can speak to, stuff which, as I mentioned, just desalination, because that's obviously what supplies most of our water, and I'm sure the technology is improving there all the time. But anything new and exciting coming along which people can grab onto and invest in?
Well, first of all, there are the leaks that happen in urban settings. In a lot of cities, upwards of 40% of all the water that's destined for households never reaches them because of leaks. So one thing you want to do is detect leaks. They're very good leak detection technologies that can do this. You then plug the leak. You then save on the water that you're trying to get to people. Another technology is wastewater treatment and reuse technology. So don't just dump your wastewater into the sea. Instead, recover it, treat it, and use it again. Perhaps in other types of uses that don't require pristine water quality.
Good tips there from Charlie Iceland. We thank you for your time on this topic.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Now, an investigation in Brazil has uncovered allegations of years of abuse of young gymnasts by a former coach. Might sound familiar. Remember, just months ago, the former sports doctor Larry Nassar admitted to molesting some of the US's top athletes. This report is from John Holman.
Dozens of Brazilian gymnasts have accused a former coach of the national team of sexual abuse, among them a Pan American Games gold medalist.
That psychological pressure on a 10 or 11-year-old boy. He sent for me, and when I went to the bathroom and he told me, take a bath and relax. Okay, I took the bath, and suddenly he entered into the bathroom and got into the bath, like if we were two children playing.
The accusations emerged in a global TV news investigation. Fernando de Carvalho Lopes denies them. He's since been fired from his job in a sports community centre.
To the point of that kind of accusation, I have nothing to say. They have to prove that. I know that I have my conscience clean because I never raped anybody. I never molested anybody in the way it's been told.
It comes on the heels of another scandal. Former USA team doctor Larry Nassar admitted that he molested some of that country's top gymnasts. More than 250 women and girls say he abused them. The allegations against Mr. Lopes are now being investigated by the Sao Paulo Public Prosecutor's Office. John Holman, Al Jazeera.
Here's Andy, our resident Liverpool football fan, to talk us through what's happening in Rome.
We have put some Roma pictures up there as well, just for a bit of balance.
Balance is what we like.
Liverpool and Roma about to play in the second leg of their Champions League semi-final. A match where the build-up has been dominated by concerns over fan safety. More than 5,000 Liverpool supporters are in the Italian capital. There's a few of them outside the Colosseum. Last week's first leg at Anfield overshadowed by an attack on home fan Sean Cox. The 53-year-old is still in hospital in a critical condition, and 2 Italian men have been charged over the incident. A huge security operation is in place in Rome. Visiting Liverpool fans have been advised not to walk to the Stadio Olimpico for the game and instead use shuttle buses.
Everything seems okay. Everyone's just here to watch the football, so no one wants any trouble. So I think it'll be all okay.
We've been told to stay away from certain areas, and if we keep away, hopefully it'll be okay. And they've said it'll be bad if we get up towards the ground. But again, the police have said they'll take us up there in a convoy. So hopefully, fingers crossed, it'll just be a good game and everybody's happy.
Well, Roma's players have been doing their bit to ease tensions in the build-up to the game. They trained in these shirts bearing the name of the injured Liverpool fan. Worth remembering, there is also a game of football about to take place. Liverpool are 5-2 up from the first leg. Roma hit back from a similar deficit in the quarter-finals when they knocked out Barcelona. Well, let's talk now to Wayne Girard, a writer for the official Roma website. He's in Woodbridge, New Jersey. Roma, like Liverpool, a US-owned club. Wayne, great to have you with us. Football hooliganism, of course, not isolated to one club or one set of fans, but give us a bit of context as to what happened last week and why perhaps we shouldn't have been too surprised by that incident.
Sure. First, we're all really praying for Sean Cox. Every Roma fan I've spoken to has the same sentiment. This is not a particular incident which just makes Roma fans more crazy than others or anything like that. We're all humans, and we're all definitely praying for him. But Roma's history with hooliganism is unfortunately something that rises in the 80s. It's prominent in the 90s, in the early 2000s. It's also there with something like that's called the Derby of the Dead Child. So it's not. Sometimes it's isolated. And there's incidents we don't hear about, though, but those are more minor incidents, which may, we say minor as in stabbing. But, yeah, it's usually not intended to mortally harm somebody. So.
And just tell us about there's a sort of stabbing that has become infamous and associated with fans in Rome. Tell us a bit about that and what that tells us about a minority of Roma fans.
Sure. I think that's something that actually stems back to medieval times, where you would use a knife to stab somebody in the butt. And that's as trivial or as comedic as that sounds, it was meant as a way of kind of overcoming your adversary to show them that you're better than them in a way. And that's something that unfortunately was its own thing, but now it's progressed on to sometimes you'll see, unfortunately, fans using weapons, serious weapons, such as hammers or bats, baseball bats. So that's something, unfortunately, that has risen. It's just grown in terms of the, not want to say capacity, but the overall violent aspect of it, where originally it was this almost sporting-like gesture of just young adults doing it just to overcome their adversary and show them that they're better, to where now it's truly something sometimes that fans or these hooligans take to inflict harm. And that's there's no place for that.
And the vast majority of Roma fans must, of course, be extremely frustrated that this minority of fans cast such a shadow over their team periodically.
That's absolutely, and that's something from the president to our fans in Indonesia to around the world. We're all upset with the hooligans who do that. And basically, we're such, loving fans. And when there's that select few that ruin it for everyone, we all get thrown under the bus on an international aspect, international limelight, unfortunately. But that's not the case. If you talk to most Roma fans, some of the most loving and adoring of their club, in Italy, it's a little different. We don't have that friendship with other clubs. Roma fans tend to, we hate other teams. That's just how it is in Italy. It's campanilismo. It's, love of your own city.
Wayne, sorry to cut you off there. We're just running out of time here. Get in touch with us, of course, using the hashtag AJNewsGrid. You can tweet me at @AndyR_sports. There'll be more from in the 1800 GMT News Hour with the latest from Rome. Let's get back to Kamal.
Thank you, Andy. Finally, for you, after the mass data leaks scandal, you probably expect Facebook would want to keep away from your private lives, but the social media platform has some new plans that may delve further into your lives. Facebook wants to play matchmaker, wants you to help find love online. Mark Zuckerberg says a new feature will soon be available, allowing users to connect for dating purposes. He says 200 million people on Facebook list themselves as single, so this is a move to rebuild some popularity amongst those users. But gaining back trust may be a tough ask due to ongoing privacy concerns. Facebook hit hard by the Cambridge Analytica debacle, which saw the private information of millions of users shared with a political consultancy.
We are announcing a new set of features coming soon around dating. Now, this is going to be for building real long-term relationships, all right, not just hookups. And what I've learned this year is that we need to take a broader view of our responsibility. It's not enough to just build powerful tools. We need to make sure that they're used for good, and we will.
Yeah, so be careful when you like someone on Facebook, I guess, is the lesson there. If you want to get in touch with us, do get in touch. I'm sorry I haven't been able to get to your comments and questions today, but between Armenia and Mike Pompeo's swearing in, it's been a busy old news grid. Twitter, Facebook and WhatsApp, get in touch with us. We'll see you back here, Studio 14 at Al Jazeera, 1500 hours GMT tomorrow, Thursday.